Hello and welcome back to my channel. Okay, so I don't think we could have a month of trying to talk about fitness without getting into recovery. So maybe I should have opened the month with that, but I find that recovery is a subject that's sort of generally considered to not be very sexy or whatever, and it tends to not take its place as far as how important it is and relative to the time people pay attention to it. So that was sloppy. But if we don't focus on recovery, if we take recovery for granted, so if we're not deliberate about our recovery, what's going to happen is we're going to shortchange our results. Okay, especially if we're looking at something where we're like working out all year. You can't take recovery for granted, especially if you're, an adult and well, actually, that doesn't matter. Even like, even young kids, if they're exercising a lot and they're not real deliberate about their recovery, they won't see good results. I actually had an incident where one summer I used to train 300 kids every day, and I tried my best to teach the kids about nutrition and recovery and whatnot, and some of the kids were gifted athletes, some of the kids were just okay athletes. There was a range, obviously, but you got to be careful because a gifted person could get away with things that just like somebody who's like decent or good can't. So, and if you're a member of the general public and you're just trying to be like, fit and healthy and, look good in your clothes, you want to stack as many things in your favor as possible. So you can't take things like recovery for granted. But in this particular incident, what happened was a lot of the kids were actually working out twice a day. So they were going to their schools, this is in the summertime, they were going to the schools early in the morning and doing a workout that, from what I understand, wasn't really structured. It wasn't periodization wasn't a factor. It was basically just about crushing the kids as much as possible every day. Because a lot of people think that's what equates to a good workout. If it was really difficult, then it was good, and that's not a good equation. It has its place, but it's not. It shouldn't be the only factor. So anyway, these kids were getting crushed every morning, and then sometime during the day they were coming to the facility where I was at, and they were doing a combination of sport-specific skill things, running, and then they were doing the weight training with me. The weight training was the only thing that was really sort of had any kind of periodization attached to it. That's a different topic. But anyway, what happened to a lot of the kids was during the course of the summer, they actually lost muscle. So a lot of them thought because they were working out twice a day, and a lot of their parents thought because they were doing that they were all going to, be really athletic at the end of it. But I think because somewhat due to kind of a lack of organization, and there was absolutely no communication between those two very different programs. That's a little bit of it, but the big thing was just the kids, they weren't recovering, and in the summertime, kids are, when they're not doing things like that, they're probably hopefully like playing, or maybe they're playing video games, but they're maybe not getting all the sleep they should, especially if they're having to get up early in the morning to go to a workout. So anyway, that's just one example. I could give more, but it's some things we can kind of look at for recovery. Okay, so one of the example I like to use, something I heard a few years ago that I have since stolen and made my own, is if we look at the concept of a yin yang, which is like opposites. And if you look at my logo, if we take a quick look at my logo, you'll notice it's sort of a yin-yang kind of based thing. I don't really believe in balance, so that's not what I'm talking about, but I'm talking about how relationships between things that don't seem like they would necessarily have a relationship. So, let's see here. So if we're looking at recovery in its relationship to exercise, the analogy that I like to use is oil and fire. So if you look at everything we do to make progress as far as working out and, well, mostly kind of working out is I think where most people are focused, if we look at that as fire, and we look at the things we do to recover properly as oil, the more oil you have, the bigger your fire is going to be. If all you're focused on is the fire, your recovery is not going to be, you're going to burn up your resources. So being deliberate about your recovery is key. So just some things you can do to stack recovery in your favor. Some of them are simple. You can get kind of complex with it, but I would say cover your simple bases first, and then if you need to get more nuanced, you can. Sleep. Sleep is a big one, and it's one that a lot of people aren't good at. I've had a lot of clients who had trouble sleeping, either going to sleep or staying asleep. So sleep hygiene is a big deal. If that's a challenge for you, let me know if you want a video on it. We can definitely get into that more, but basically sleep hygiene is very important. So making sure that you're setting yourself up properly to get good rest, and that you're getting get adequate rest. In general, people need between 7 to 9 hours of sleep. That can vary from person to person, and it can vary. I think it can also be kind of seasonal, and it can kind of vary depending on what's going on. There might be times where you need more sleep. There might be times where you need less sleep. The point is to get an adequate amount of sleep so that you're not under recovered. Okay, especially again, as we, as adults, as we mature, we don't recover better than we did when we were young. And I can tell you from experience that even like young people don't necessarily, just because they're like, they have a lot of energy and they're always active, that doesn't mean their recovery is optimal. So, and part of that is a lot of young people, their nutrition is awful. So that doesn't help anything. So sleep is a big one. Just make sure you get an adequate amount of sleep. Another thing is post-workout. So if you go to the gym or you work out at home or whatever, and you crush it and you're fatigued post-workout, you want to recover as fast as you can. So now this can kind of vary a little bit depending on what your goals are. So if you are trying to be in very good shape and you want that to be obvious when people see you, then you need to be very deliberate about your post-workout nutrition. If you're just trying to be healthy, I would say just make sure you eat within like an hour or two after you're done. So that can depend a little bit on goals, but what I have observed over the years is people that are more deliberate about what they do post-workout do see better results, especially as far as body composition. That means building muscle and burning fat, versus people that just work out and don't think about it. When you exercise, your body produces cortisol. That's a natural thing, but cortisol isn't bad for us. I know I've talked to a couple people who, they've heard about cortisol, and the impression is that it's a bad hormone. It's not a bad hormone. It's an important hormone. The thing is that you don't want it to be elevated chronically and all the time. So we want to get cortisol levels down quickly post-workout, especially if you're an individual who has a lot of stress in their life. So, and I don't know anyone who hasn't had some stress in their life the last 2 years. Everybody's, I think, had an abnormal amount of stress regardless of what they do and everything. But, so if you do a post-workout shake, if you do some kind of post-workout nutrition, that's going to suppress cortisol levels. Cortisol and insulin cannot be elevated at the same time. So if you drink something, that's the whole reason we have protein shakes, is because they're just easy to digest. But if you do something like that after you lift, or whatever the exercise is, doesn't necessarily have to be weight training, you will get your body, that can help to kind of get your body into recovery mode sooner, so that you're not just leaving with elevated cortisol. So especially if you're noticing, if you're working out and you're having trouble burning fat, especially belly fat, that can be a key indication that your cortisol is out of whack. So I would take that into consideration. If you're doing something like a branched chain amino acid, post-workout, you probably don't need to do protein too, because if you take branched chain amino acids, that's protein broken down. So that should be enough to get your body sort of into a recovery state. But if you find that you're not, then you might want to reevaluate that. There's a lot of ways we could go with that thing. Another thing that I've done over the years that I've had good results with is I would have some of my, especially athletes, take magnesium glycinate and taurine after a game, because that'll calm you down. So magnesium has a little bit of a, what's the word? So while magnesium is a mineral, it has a bit of an adaptogenic effect. What that means is if you take magnesium after a workout, what it's going to do is help to calm you down. Or after like an athletic event. If you take magnesium just kind of like during the day, it will actually help your cells to produce energy. So a lot of people have this impression that magnesium is for sleep. It's not exclusively for sleep. You just have to think about like when you take it. So I generally take magnesium during the day because it fundamentally helps your cells to produce energy. But then I also like to take magnesium before I go to bed because it does have a calming effect. And there's several different types of magnesium. Absolutely, positively, no matter what you do not take, buy, use, or prescribe, if you're some kind of medical person, magnesium oxide. So if you're a personal trainer, if you're a doctor, again, not giving medical advice, but if you're a doctor, don't give people magnesium oxide. Magnesium glycinate is a great form of magnesium. That's not that hard to find. And there's a lot of other different chelates that you can look at. I'll do a magnesium video sometime. But basically, magnesium glycinate and taurine post-workout or post-athletic event can do a lot to get you to calm down and get into a recovery mode. Some people like breathing resets. I've never really been crazy about those personally, but if you've never tried that, you can do some research on it, find out what they are, and you can experiment with them and see if you like them. I know some people think they're amazing. I've just never, whatever. I don't really, in fairness, I haven't really tried them a lot. I've done them a little bit, and they didn't do much for me. But that doesn't mean they're not fantastic for you. So the last thing I'll say about recovery is stretching can be beneficial. In reality, if you're weight training, you will get your best stretch probably between 4 and 6 hours after you work out or later. If you try to stretch right after you work out, it might help a little bit, but the stretch probably isn't going to be as effective because your body is kind of stimulated and the muscles are kind of ready to contract. So when you are stretching, all you really should be trying to do is get your muscles to go back to a normal resting length. You shouldn't be you don't have to be inducing like extreme flexibility. So now if you're a dancer or something like that, you probably require more extreme degree of flexibility, but I'll talk about that another time. I do want to say there's flexibility is something I feel is not understood well. Range of motion is specific to velocity. So we'll talk about that another time. But basically, a good time to stretch can be before you go to bed. Okay, so this kind of goes back to the sleep hygiene idea. But if you are having trouble going to sleep or whatever, or if you just need a routine to get into before bed to get your body into like a more of a frame of reference of rest, stretching before you go to bed can be a great idea. And some people think it can even really help to build muscle because you're recovering. So doing like some kind of simple stretch routine before bed can be fantastic. It can be yoga if you want it to be yoga, if you're a yoga person, or even just, find some muscles that are tight and stretch them. It doesn't have to be complicated necessarily, but again, you're just trying to get the muscle to go back to a normal resting length. Which what that means is, so like right now I'm sitting down. So because I'm sitting down, my knee flexors, my hamstrings, they're in a semi-contracted position because I'm sitting. When I stand up, my hamstrings are going to stay partly contracted to prepare my body for the next time I sit. That might sound strange, but that's what the body does. So for those of you that have desk jobs, you spend a lot of time sitting down, those knee flexors can tend to kind of stay in a shortened position and it can cause issues. So if you just stretch them at some time during the day, you're asking them to go back to a normal resting length and to relax. And that can do a lot to alleviate back pain and other things. That's kind of a segue, but basically just Find some muscles that are tight, stretch them before you go to bed. It'll help with recovery. The main point is you need to be deliberate about your recovery, especially if you are, someone who's in their 30s, 40s, 50s, or older, and you're trying to exercise on a regular basis. Don't take your recovery for granted. It will shortchange you. There's a saying that fatigue masks fitness. A lot of people that work out hard under recover, so they lose the ability to express kind of the shape they're actually in. This is a problem with some sports that do too much conditioning. Like swimmers tend to chronically be sort of like overtrained. A lot of cross-country athletes. There's a lot of sports. If you do something like soccer or basketball, and you have like regular practices, you probably don't need to do like additional cardiovascular work on top of your regular training, unless you're training very infrequently. But it doesn't take very much to maintain an aerobic base. You should probably be focusing more on like your anaerobic output. But anyway, don't take your recovery for granted. If you focus on your recovery, you will probably find that you will get better results across the board. I've used up all my words for the day. I am done.